Welcome to the Leading Sheep webinar series on pregnancy scanning merinos to better manage your flock, featuring Pat Hegarty from Colanya near Longreach and Chris Shands, a rural advisor from New South Wales. This is part 1 of 6, where Pat Hegarty discusses his experience with preg scanning on his merino sheep operation.
My name's Pat Hegarty, 140 kilometres west of Longreach. In Western Queensland, our property's 13,500 hectares. We run around 8,000 to 9,000 sheep, comprising approximately 3,000 breeding ewes, similar number of wethers and progeny from those ewes. We began scanning here at Colanya in 2004. We thought it was going to be a good tool to, and I still do think it's a great tool to help you try and increase your production. When we began in 2004, we were using the local vet in town who was operating with a VE machine, and that was good, did a good job, had good results with that. And we actually scanned for twins in those first 2 years, and as you can see on the screen there, those were the results of those from that twin scanning. The result wasn't huge, I didn't feel. For ewes that were scanned with twins, around about 18 to 20% of our ewes were scanned in lamb with twins, and then we were getting those kind of percentages from them. We went away from using the local vet 2 years later simply because it was a little bit expensive and we couldn't get the people to operate it. We needed about 5 offsiders to muster and take ewes away, and we had to tip the ewes over in the VE machine. So we needed quite a few people, and just finding the people became very difficult. Plus it was a little expensive to pay them all. So we stopped using that guy and we started using Sam Usher from down at Morven with his automatic drafting system. At the same time, we also decided that we wouldn't scan for twins because we were having a little bit of problem. Just didn't feel that we were set up well enough for it. We were lambing in fairly big paddocks, and some of those paddocks had main roads through them and water's right beside the main roads, and it wasn't overly successful, I didn't feel. I thought we were losing a lot of lamb simply because we weren't set up well enough. We continued to go ahead and scan each year, and we always sold our dries off. We sell the lot, including maidens, each year. We did keep those dries 1 year and rejoined them, but we only got about 60% out of those dry ewes, and it left us with a small number of lambs that were totally out of sync with everything else. So we wanted to get away from that, and we simply just sell everything now, sell all the dries off. I do believe scanning is a fantastic tool to use in the management of your ewes and the management of your business. A lot of people ask me why we scan every year, and I believe it's a great tool to know if your rams are doing the job and whether your ewes are also doing the job. We're generally scanning here around about 93 to 95% average, have all the way through, and we're pretty happy with that result. And I just feel if you don't scan, you really don't know. If you don't get lambs down the track, you really don't know if it's because your rams weren't fertile, your rams weren't doing the job, or there was something wrong with your ewes, or the dingoes were chasing the daylights out of your ewes, or whatever. But if you're getting good scanning results, at least you know they've got them in lamb. So we then move on down to the nutritional side of it. And I don't want to dwell on this. I know it's not a webinar on feeding sheep, but I'm very big on feeding, feeding pregnant ewes, and we've got, I like to think we've got bigger and better at it over the last few years. And we're actually this year going to scan for twins again for the first time for about 6 years, simply because we feel that we're in a better position to manage those ewes correctly. As I said, we were getting really good scanning results nearly all the time that we've been scanning. We've never really had a bad scanning year, but we weren't getting the lambs, and we were getting so frustrated with that because we knew the ewes had the lambs on board and we were losing them. And the biggest problem I felt was nutrition. Well, it was twofold, to be honest, nutrition and predators. Nutrition, I think, was probably about 70% of the problem, and probably 30% predators. So we do a lot of work on predators and a lot of work on nutrition. So in recent years, we've done a lot of subdivisional fencing on our property, and we've now got a lot more small paddocks set up with numerous waters. Most would have 3 waters in them. Most of those paddocks are around about 2,000 acres, and we would run sort of 400 to 500 ewes in those paddocks with 3 waters. And just 2 years ago, we used the services of a sheep nutritionist called Dr. John Milton in Western Australia. It's been a big help to us in trying to get the nutrition right. I don't believe there's any point in scanning sheep if you're not going to look after those ewes once you've proved that they're in lamb, and once you've got them all 100% pregnant and ready to go. And at the same time, I don't believe there's any point in feeding sheep if you don't scan them, because you're probably feeding a lot of sheep that aren't pregnant and aren't going to rear you a lamb. And another point we found with scanning too was that a lot of ewes were getting, not so much a lot of ewes, but a percentage of ewes were scanning in lamb and not actually rearing those lambs. And we found that a great tool early in the piece. It's not such a problem now because we like to think we've sorted a lot of those ewes out. But we were scanning the ewes, and then later on after they dropped the lambs, we used to wet and dry, and you'd find that there's quite a few ewes coming through that weren't actually rearing their lambs, and we sold them all off to the meatworks. And usually they were the maddest ones, the ones that want to jump the fence or burrow up under the sheep in the classing race or whatever. So I think scanning is a great tool to sort a lot of those sheep out, because if you've got mad sheep like that, they're the first things to run away when you go out to check a water trough or to check waters or whatever, and they usually take everything with them, especially maiden ewes, notorious for that. So just want to move on to this, the nutritional side of it, as I do think that's important. As I said, we consulted with Dr. John Milton, and he got us onto the grain feeding. We feed a lot of corn now to our ewes, and we started by feeding that on the ground back in sort of 2004, 5, 6 at that time, and was reasonably successful for a couple of years, but we got into a lot of trouble with the sheep chasing us for it, and we lost a lot of lambs because of that. The ewes would run away and leave the lambs behind and chase the feed vehicle. So the last couple of years we've invested a lot of money in feeding bins. That bin you can see on the screen there, we've got 32 of those now on our place, and we place one of those at every water. Put corn in those, and we feed those ewes about 2 kilos of corn a week, plus a mineral lick as well in tyres beside the feeders, and that has been working very well for us. In that picture also you can see some alpacas. We run alpacas, around about 5 or 6 alpacas in with our ewes as a guardian against the wild dogs and foxes. We also do a lot of 1080 baiting. We probably bait about 7 times a year, particularly through lambing. Prior and during lambing we would bait at least every month to try and keep the predators down, pigs, foxes and dogs. And last year we invested in those silos you can see there to store our grain. And that there is a mob of ewes that have been on that program last year. That's only a small mob there, small mob of stud ewes, only 100 ewes in that mob, but that mob of ewes reared 133%. And interestingly, when we scanned those ewes, there was 40% of those scanned in lamb with twins, and we reared 133% out of those ewes. So we're very happy with that result. And it just gets your confidence up that you can do good things with the sheep. I feel if 100 ewes can do that, why can't 1,000 or a couple of thousand? So we're sort of pretty confident now that we've got a good program going to supplement those ewes once they are all pregnant and ready to go. Another little thing we're doing now, we're starting to breed a few rams here, and this year, 2012, we're actually drawing some young rams at 7 months of age to a mob of ewes. We joined them pretty heavily at about 4%. So we'll be able to use the scanning to see how successful that experiment was. We just feel that those little rams have got a lot of genetic potential, and if we can join them very early like that, we can make use of their genetic potential a year earlier. So we will scan that mobby ewes up on their own and gauge how that experiment went. Okay, well that's nearly it for me. I've just about covered everything there. We do drench our ewes quite a lot, and we always give them a 6-in-1 vaccine at scanning. Usually when the ewes are in the cradle being scanned, we got an operator up there with a vaccination needle, and we always give the ewes a 6-in-1, and then recent years we've been using a ewe guard, which is a 6-in-1 and a drench as well. We try to do everything possible to get those ewes in lamb, and also to rear those lambs once they're been conceived and ready to go. So that's